Welcome. A massive, super high energy, and just incredibly warm welcome to you, the listener, joining us today. We are so thrilled to have you here with us. Let us just jump right into it, because today's deep dive starts with a story that, honestly, it feels like an absolute nightmare.
Oh, totally. A complete nightmare scenario.
Right. So imagine it is the year 1985. You are a young, brilliant creator. You started a technology company in your parents' garage, and over 10 years, you built it into a multi-million-dollar global empire. You're famous, you're wealthy.
You are the very top of the world.
Exactly. But then one afternoon, the people who work for you lock the doors. They take your empire away. They literally throw you out into the street. I mean, it feels like the end of the world, right?
It really does. Hello to you, the listener, by the way. It is so wonderful to be here. And yes, our mission today is to look at disaster from a completely different angle. We are going to look at the moments when everything goes wrong and examine the hidden mechanic of why those terrible moments are actually setting up something magnificent.
And let me just say, I am going to need some heavy convincing on this one. I will be totally honest with you and our listener. I am a bit of a dramatic pessimist.
Just a little bit.
Okay, let's unpack this. When a disaster happens, if I lose a job, if I fail a massive exam, or if a project I worked on for a year completely collapses, I do not look at that and say, oh, what a wonderful gateway to greatness.
No, of course not. Nobody naturally says that.
Right. No, I want to fall face first onto my bed, pull the blanket over my head, and just scream into a pillow. To me, a disaster is just a giant brick wall.
And, that reaction makes perfect sense. It is exactly how human beings are biologically wired. From an evolutionary standpoint, we want safety. We want predictability.
We want things to be easy.
We want our plans to work out exactly the way we wrote them down on paper. If a plan fails, our brain sends out warning signals that we are in danger. But if we look closely at our sources today, we find that life loves playing wild, unpredictable tricks on us.
But are they tricks, or are they just tragedies? Because getting fired or going bankrupt, it does not feel like a clever trick. I mean, it feels like a punishment.
It feels like a punishment in the short term, absolutely. But let us look at it through a different lens. Imagine you are walking down a long hallway. You see a door, you walk toward it, and suddenly a heavy, thick wooden door slams right in your face.
Ouch.
It hurts. Your nose is bleeding. You stand there feeling rejected, sad, and just really confused.
Exactly. I would sit on the floor and complain about my broken nose.
Most of us would.
Yeah.
But what feels like a heavy door slamming in your face is actually the universe forcing you to stop walking in the wrong direction. That painful stop gives you a chance to turn around and notice that right behind you, well, there's a much bigger, much more beautiful, wide-open entrance.
An entrance you never would have seen.
Right, an entrance you never would have seen if you had just walked through that first small door.
It is a beautiful metaphor. It really is. The idea that the worst day of your life is actually just the opening scene of your greatest success story. But metaphors are easy. I need real evidence.
I can provide the evidence.
Let us talk about survival and careers. Because for most people, your career is how you feed your family. You mentioned that guy in 1985 who got thrown out of his own company. That was Steve Jobs, right? The founder of Apple.
Yes, that is the one.
But isn't getting fired literally the end of the world, especially from a company you built from absolutely nothing?
What's fascinating here is that the historical record shows us the exact opposite. Yes, we are talking about Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Today, we know him as the legend who put a computer in every home and a smartphone in every pocket.
He changed everything.
He did. But in 1985, his situation was a complete humiliating disaster. And to understand why it was a gateway to greatness, we have to look at how a corporation actually works.
Right, because he didn't just quit. He was forced out by his own board of directors. How does that even happen? How do you get fired from a company that literally has your name on the foundation?
So when a company grows as fast as Apple did, it sells shares, pieces of ownership, to investors. And those investors elect a group of people called a board of directors to make sure the company is making money.
Okay, that makes sense.
Steve Jobs was a brilliant artist and a visionary, but he was also known for being chaotic, demanding, and very expensive to work with. He clashed constantly with the CEO he had hired.
Oh, a man named John Scully, right?
Yes, John Scully. The board of directors looked at the situation, decided Jobs was too disruptive, and voted to remove him from his own project teams. They took away all his power.
Wow. The public humiliation of that must have been just crushing. To open the newspaper and read that you were too difficult for the company you literally invented.
It was devastating.
That is not just losing a paycheck. That is losing your entire identity. If I am Steve Jobs in 1985, I am thinking my life is officially over.
He was completely devastated. He later said he felt like the breath had been knocked right out of him. But let us look at the mechanics of what happened next. Being the famous face of Apple was an incredibly heavy burden. Everyone expected him to be perfect.
Right, they wanted him to be a standard businessman.
Everyone expected him to act like a traditional corporate boss. When that door slammed shut and he was fired, all of those expectations vanished overnight. He was suddenly free.
So he lost his empire, but he also lost the heavy chains of having to protect that empire. I read a book recently about Zen Buddhism, and it talked about something called shoshin.
Oh, the beginner's mind.
Exactly, which translates to the beginner's mind. The idea is that in the mind of an expert, there are very few possibilities, but in the mind of a beginner, there are endless possibilities. Did getting fired basically force Steve Jobs back into a beginner's mind?
That is a brilliant connection, and it is exactly what happened. Without the pressure of Apple, Jobs entered the most creative period of his entire life. He started a brand new computer company called NXT.
Okay, I have heard of NXT.
Now, NXT did not sell many computers, but Jobs used it as a laboratory to build a completely new, highly advanced software operating system. And because he was curious and had free time, he also bought a small, struggling computer graphics department from the filmmaker George Lucas.
Wait, I know this part of the story. That small graphics department became Pixar Animation Studios, didn't it?
Precisely. Jobs funded them, gave them space to experiment, and Pixar eventually created Toy Story, which completely revolutionized the world of animated cinema. It brought magic to millions of children and adults.
That is so cool.
If Steve Jobs had remained at Apple, fighting in corporate meetings every day, he never would have had the time, the energy, or the freedom to help build Pixar.
That alone is amazing. But his story with Apple wasn't over, was it?
Not at all. Over the next decade, without Jobs, Apple began to fail. Their software was old and slow. They were losing money rapidly. They desperately needed a new operating system to survive.
Let me guess. They looked at NXT.
They looked at Steve Jobs' new company, NXT. Apple ended up buying NXT just to get their hands on that brilliant software. And as part of the deal, Steve Jobs walked right back through the front door of Apple.
That is the ultimate comeback.
Right.
And the software he built during his quote-unquote failure years became the foundation for every Mac computer we use today.
Exactly. When he returned, he brought that beginner's mind with him. He was wiser, he was more patient, and he was ready to create the iPod, the iPad, and the iPhone.
Devices that quite literally changed human history.
Years later, Steve Jobs told a group of graduating university students that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to him. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again.
So the disaster of 1985 was just the universe pushing him away from a narrow corporate path and forcing him toward a much wider path of innovation.
Which brings us perfectly to our first key English phrase for today's deep dive. When you experience a terrible event that secretly contains a wonderful gift, you are experiencing a blessing in disguise.
A blessing in disguise. Let's break that down for our listener.
A blessing is a wonderful gift or a lucky event. A disguise is a costume you wear to hide who you really are. So a blessing in disguise is something that seems very bad or unlucky at first, but it actually results in something remarkably good later on. It is a beautiful gift wearing the ugly costume of a disaster.
The disaster is just a mask. I love that imagery. Do you have an example sentence for our listener to help lock this into their memory?
I do. Please listen carefully to this exact example sentence. Getting fired felt terrible at first, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise when he built his own successful company.
Let me repeat that clearly so our listener can practice the pronunciation. Getting fired felt terrible at first, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise when he built his own successful company. Okay, I will give you a point for the optimist team.
I will take it.
But Steve Jobs was a human being making deliberate choices. He chose to start NXT. He chose to buy Pixar. What happens when bad things happen completely by accident? When things just get ruined without any plan at all?
I would argue that accidents are some of the most powerful gateways to greatness we have ever seen in history.
Wait, but how can a totally messy mistake in a lab ever be a good thing? I mean, if I leave dirty dishes out in my kitchen, it is just gross. It attracts bugs. There is no greatness in dirty dishes. It is just a sign that I was too lazy to clean up.
If you think dirty dishes are just annoying, we need to look at the research surrounding a scientist named Alexander Fleming. This story takes us back to London in the year 1928.
Okay, 1928.
Alexander Fleming was a brilliant researcher working in a medical laboratory at St. Mary's Hospital.
Now, wait a minute. When I think of a medical laboratory, I think of extreme cleanliness. Everyone wears white coats, everything is sterile, and precision is the absolute most important rule. You cannot make messy mistakes in science, right?
That is the standard rule, yes.
Yeah.
But Alexander Fleming was a bit different. He was known for being quite messy.
Really? A messy scientist?
Very messy. His workspace was constantly cluttered with little glass dishes called petri dishes, which scientists used to grow and study bacteria. At this time in history, bacteria were a massive problem. If you got a tiny scratch on your arm while working in the garden, that scratch could become infected with bacteria and you could easily die.
Wait, just from a small scratch?
Yes. During World War I, Fleming watched thousands of soldiers survive the actual battle, only to die days later in the hospital because their small wounds became infected. There were no medicines to stop bacterial infections. So in 1928, Fleming was desperately trying to study a very dangerous bacteria called Staphylococcus.
So he is studying this deadly bacteria in his little glass dishes. Where does the accident happen?
It was late summer, and Fleming decided to take his family on a long vacation to Scotland. But in his rush to leave the laboratory, he was careless. He did not wash his glass dishes.
Oh, no.
He did not put them away in a safe, sterile environment. He just left them sitting out on his messy desk, completely exposed to the air.
Going on a long holiday and leaving dishes full of bacteria sitting in a warm room. That is a literal recipe for a biological disaster. I can only imagine the smell.
It was a tremendous mistake. And to make it worse, the weather in London that month was very strange. It was unusually cold for a few days and then suddenly became very warm. While Fleming was away enjoying his vacation, a tiny spore of mold, a type of fungus, floated through the open window of his lab and landed right in one of his dirty dishes.
So now he has deadly bacteria and gross window mold growing in the exact same dish.
Exactly. When Fleming finally returned from Scotland, he walked into his laboratory and started cleaning up his messy desk. He picked up the glass dishes and saw that they were completely ruined. They were covered in thick, gross, fuzzy mold. His experiment was destroyed by his own laziness.
See, if that were me, the deep dive would end right there. I would throw the dishes into the garbage, wash my hands vigorously for 20 minutes, and feel incredibly guilty for ruining my own scientific work.
And 99% of scientists would have done exactly that. They would have seen a ruined plan. But Fleming stopped. He had a habit of looking very closely at his mistakes.
What did he see?
He held the ruined glass dish up to the light, and he noticed a very strange pattern. The fuzzy mold was growing in the center of the dish. But all around the edges of the mold, there was a perfectly clear, clean ring of liquid. He realized that the deadly Staphylococcus bacteria could not grow anywhere near that mold.
Wait, so the bacteria were actually running away from the mold?
Not running away. They were being destroyed.
Yeah.
You asked earlier how this works. Let's look at the biological mechanics. Out in nature, mold and bacteria are constantly fighting each other for the same food sources.
Oh, like a microscopic war.
To win this war, this specific type of mold had evolved a defense mechanism. It produced a natural chemical juice that literally popped the walls of the bacteria cells, completely destroying them.
So it is biological warfare happening in a tiny glass dish. And Fleming caught them right in the middle of the battle.
Exactly. That messy, accidental fungus was producing a juice that killed one of the most deadly bacteria known to humanity. Fleming isolated that juice, and from that gross mistake, he discovered penicillin.
Penicillin. The medicine that completely changed the world.
The very first antibiotic. Before penicillin, hospitals were places you went to hope for the best. After penicillin, doctors could actually cure infections. Because of that one dirty dish, it is estimated that over 200 million lives have been saved around the world.
200 million lives? From a scientist who forgot to clean his desk before going on vacation. That is wild.
Exactly. If his laboratory had been perfectly clean, if his plans had gone perfectly right, if he'd followed all the strict rules of science, well, millions of people would not have had the medicine they needed. Sometimes a ruined plan is just nature's way of forcing you to look at a solution you never would have found on purpose.
That is an incredible perspective. A ruined plan in a tiny glass dish created a global miracle. But you just mentioned nature, and that brings me to my next big problem with your theory, and I think our listener will agree with me on this one.
Bring it on. Let's test the theory.
We just talked about a tiny microscopic accident in a lab. You can control a petri dish, But what about massive, uncontrollable natural disasters? Sometimes destruction is just purely destructive. What about a volcanic eruption?
Volcanoes.
A mountain explodes, it burns everything down, it fills the sky with choking dark smoke. I mean, that is not a gateway to greatness. That is just an absolute apocalyptic disaster.
It certainly looks like an apocalyptic disaster when you are standing in front of it. When a volcano erupts, it is terrifying. The heat is unimaginable. Red-hot lava flows down the side of the mountain, instantly incinerating ancient, beautiful trees. It burns the green grass into black dust. The thick, dark smoke fills the atmosphere and completely blocks out the sun.
See, I am right. There is no positive side to that. It is just death and fire. You cannot look at a burned black forest and tell me it is a good thing.
If we only look at the first chapter of the story, you are absolutely right. It is a tragedy. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of how the Earth's ecosystem functions, you will see the mechanics of nature's genius.
Nature's genius.
Yeah.
Okay, explain that.
Nature thinks in very long periods of time. Yes, the fire is destructive, but we have to look closely at what is actually coming out of that volcano. It is not just fire, it is volcanic ash.
Which is just gray, choking, dirty dust that ruins the air.
It looks like dust, but chemically it is a gold mine. Volcanic ash is pulverized rock from deep inside the Earth. It is packed with the richest, most powerful base minerals on the entire planet. We are talking about massive amounts of magnesium, potassium, calcium, and phosphorus.
Okay, those are minerals.
These are the exact chemical elements that plants desperately need to survive and grow.
Wait, so the ash is basically natural fertilizer.
It is the most potent fertilizer in the world. Think about an old forest. Over hundreds of years, the heavy rains wash all the good nutrients out of the soil. The ground becomes tired and depleted. The trees stop growing as tall.
So the forest gets weak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But after a terrifying volcanic eruption finally dies down and the lava cools off, you are left with this burned black ground covered in ash. It looks dead.
But it isn't dead.
It is waiting. When the rain finally falls, the water dissolves those volcanic minerals and mixes them deep into the earth. The process is called chemical weathering. And that black, burned ground rapidly transforms into the most fertile, rich soil on the entire planet.
Wow. So the ground is literally recharged like a battery. It becomes much better ground than it was before the fire even started.
Infinitely better.
Yeah.
Because of that violent destruction, the ground is perfectly prepared to grow healthier crops, stronger plants, and incredibly vibrant, dense green forests. In ecology, this is part of a process called primary succession.
Primary succession. Got it.
The old, tired forest has to burn down so that the rich, new, extraordinary forest has the space and the nutrients to take its place. Destruction is simply nature's brutal way of clearing out old, stagnant energy.
Clearing out old energy. I really, really like that framing. The volcano is hitting a giant reset button on the Earth. It is painful, it is scary, but it is necessary for future growth. So what does this all mean? It means that even in the darkest, most terrifying, smoky situations, even when you cannot see the sun, there is a hopeful future hiding inside the darkness.
Exactly, and that brings us to another wonderful English phrase that perfectly captures this feeling. When you see the dark smoke of the volcano, but you know the rich soil is coming, you are looking for a silver lining.
A silver lining.
Yes, picture a big, dark, heavy rain cloud moving across the sky. It looks gloomy and depressing. But if the sun is hiding just behind that cloud, the sunlight will catch the very edges of the cloud, making the edges glow with a bright silver light.
Oh, I can picture that perfectly.
So when we say a silver lining, we mean finding a comforting, positive aspect or a hopeful feature inside an otherwise dark, sad, or stressful situation.
That is a very poetic image. The dark cloud is still there, but it has a bright, glowing edge that reminds you the sun still exists.
Exactly. It is a great phrase to use when a friend is feeling sad about a disaster and you want to gently point out the hidden opportunity. Here is the exact example sentence for you and our listener to remember. Even during the most stressful times, staying positive helps you find a silver lining in every situation.
Let me say that one too. Even during the most stressful times, staying positive helps you find a silver lining in every situation. Okay, I have to admit, your evidence is really starting to pile up today.
It usually does.
The Steve Jobs story shows the value of a forced beginner's mind. The dirty dish shows the value of accidental discoveries. The volcanic soil shows the necessity of clearing out old energy. It all makes logical sense. But let us apply this volcanic clearing of energy to something much more personal.
Let's do it. Let us look at our personal lives and our daily careers.
Because nature operates on a timeline of centuries. But human emotions, and more importantly, human bank accounts, operate right now. Let us imagine a massive business failure.
A painful topic for many.
What if you put all your savings, all your time, all your sleepless nights into a business project and it just completely collapses? I want to push back on this because bankruptcy does not feel like a blank canvas. It feels like a deep, dark hole of debt. Doesn't a business failure just prove that you were foolish and you should have stayed in a cozy, comfortable, safe job?
I completely understand the fear behind that question. Putting your life savings into a dream, working late nights, partnering with someone you trust, and then watching the bank accounts empty out and the project fall apart, well, it feels horrible.
It is the worst feeling.
You end up crying on the kitchen floor wondering why you ever took a risk in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is the reality for a lot of people, because if you had just stayed at your normal office job, drinking your normal break room coffee, doing your normal routine, you would not be crying on the floor. You would be safe from the pain.
Safe from the pain, yes. But here is the extreme danger of that kind of safety. That cozy, comfortable job you just described. Very often, it is actually a comfortable cage.
A comfortable cage. That is an intense way to describe an office job.
Think about it. The door to the cage is locked from the inside, but the pillows in the cage are so soft and the food is delivered on time, so you never even try to leave. Remaining trapped in a comfortable cage protects you from failure, but it completely stops you from ever reaching your true potential.
Because you never try anything new.
Exactly. You might have an okay life, but you will never have a great life.
So when you take a risk and the business fails, what actually happens to the cage?
When a partnership breaks or when a business fails and everything burns down to the ground like that volcano, the cage is completely destroyed. The soft pillows are gone. You are forced to step out into the wild.
That sounds terrifying.
Yes, you are terrified. Yes, you might be in debt. But for the first time in your life, you are truly free. You are no longer defending a bad idea. This is related to a psychological concept called the sunk cost fallacy.
Oh, I know this one. The sunk cost fallacy is when you keep investing money or time into a terrible project simply because you have already invested so much money and time into it. You are terrified of walking away and admitting you lost.
Exactly. A massive failure completely destroys the sunk cost fallacy. You have nothing left to protect. And because you have nothing left to protect, you have a blank canvas. You have to start over, but this time you are starting over with all the valuable, painful lessons you learned from your failure. You know exactly what not to do.
So the fresh start is actually an advantage, even if it feels like a punishment.
Exactly. That fresh start is usually where true masterpieces are born. You are no longer held back by old rules, bad partners, or the fear of failing because you already survived the failure. Which brings us to our next key English phrase, to start from scratch.
To start from scratch, I hear this phrase all the time, especially in cooking, like making a chocolate cake from scratch instead of using a pre-made mix from a box.
It is the exact same concept. In life and business, to start from scratch means to begin a process again from the absolute beginning, usually because your previous attempt failed completely or because you have absolutely no previous materials to build on.
You have nothing to work with.
If you have no head start, you just have your own two hands and your hard-earned knowledge.
So if my business project collapses and the cage burns down, I take a deep breath and I just start from scratch, building a stronger foundation.
Precisely. You build it better the second time. Here is the exact example sentence for you and our listener to practice this phrase. After the partnership failed, she had to start from scratch and build a completely new business.
Let me practice that. After the partnership failed, she had to start from scratch and build a completely new business. I am really starting to see the pattern here. The failure destroys the old, comfortable cage, so you can build something much stronger from scratch. But I have one more massive challenge for you today.
I'm always ready for a challenge. What is your scenario?
Starting from scratch after a failure is one thing. That is a single event. But what about when you try to start from scratch, you put your heart into a new project, and the world just keeps actively saying no to you? I am talking about repeated, painful, continuous rejection. Here's where it gets really interesting. Let us talk about writers and artists. If 12 different publishers read your book and reject it, shouldn't you just give up?
That is a lot of rejection.
Every rejection letter is like a slap in the face. It is not a fresh start. It is an active denial of your worth.
Rejection is incredibly painful, and you are right, it feels very personal. Getting one rejection letter hurts. Getting 12 rejection letters feels like the universe is screaming at you to stop trying. It feels like the world is demanding that you surrender. But I want to tell you the historical reality of someone who received exactly 12 rejection letters. We are going to talk about J.K. Rowling.
Ah, J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series, a billionaire author who is known all over the world. It is hard to imagine her ever failing.
Today, she is a global icon. But let us look at the reality of her life in the early 1990s, long before the magic and the fame. Before the world knew the name Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling was living what many would consider an absolute nightmare.
Really? I didn't know that.
Her marriage had collapsed. She was a single mother trying to raise a baby on her own. She was completely broke, relying on government welfare assistance just to buy food. She was unemployed, and she was living in a tiny, freezing, cramped apartment in Scotland.
That is the ultimate low point. She had absolutely nothing to fall back on.
Nothing except an idea in her mind about a young boy who discovers he is a wizard. Because she couldn't afford proper heating in her apartment, she would put her baby in a stroller and walk to local cafes just to stay warm. While the baby slept, she would sit at the cafe table and type her story on an old, cheap manual typewriter. After years of struggling, she finally finished her manuscript.
A manuscript is the original unpublished text of a book, so she finishes the massive stack of papers. Then what?
She put it in an envelope, paid for the expensive postage stamp she could barely afford, and sent it to a major publishing company in London.
And then the terrible waiting game begins, waiting for the mail to arrive every day.
She waited for months. And then the letter finally came back. It was a rejection. No, thank you.
Oh, that must have been a heavy blow.
It was. So she gathered her courage, repackaged the manuscript, and sent it to a second publisher. Months later, no. A third publisher, no. Imagine the heavy, dark, suffocating feeling in that tiny apartment. 4, 5, 6 publishers. They all rejected it.
Why were they rejecting it? Did they give her a reason?
Yes. The business of publishing children's books in the 1990s had very strict rules. Experts believed that children had very short attention spans. They believed children only wanted short, simple books. J.K. Rowling had written a complex, slightly dark, 90,000-word novel. The publishers told her it was far too long and far too difficult for children to read.
A slap in the face, over and over again from the industry experts.
She was rejected by 12 major publishing companies in a row. 12 highly paid professionals telling her that her dream was mathematically guaranteed to fail.
See, this is exactly my point. If I got to rejection letter number 5, I would have thrown the typewriter out the window. If 12 experts look at your work and tell you no, isn't it logical to just stop? Isn't it crazy to keep pushing?
It might seem completely irrational to keep pushing, but she refused to accept their definition of failure. She believed deeply in the magic of her story. She viewed the rejections not as a brick wall, but as a test of her endurance. Finally, she sent the manuscript to a 13th publisher, a relatively small publishing house in London called Bloomsbury.
And they finally said yes.
They did, but only because of a lucky twist of fate. The chairman of Bloomsbury took the first chapter home, and his 8-year-old daughter, Alice, found it. She read it, absolutely loved it, and demanded to read the rest of the book.
A child actually read it.
Because a child proved the experts wrong, Bloomsbury decided to take a huge risk and give Rowling a chance. They printed a very tiny number of copies of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.
And the rest is history.
Global, unprecedented history. Harry Potter became an absolute cultural phenomenon. It shattered every rule of the publishing industry. Children were happily reading massive 700-page books. It sold hundreds of millions of copies. It became a multi-billion-dollar movie franchise. It built massive theme parks. J.K. Rowling went from a broke single mother in a freezing apartment to one of the most successful, wealthy, and influential authors in human history.
That is just unbelievable. You know, I often think about the people who wrote those first 12 rejection letters. They must feel so incredibly foolish today. They had $1 billion property in their hands and they mailed it back. She completely reversed her situation on them.
She certainly did. She went from being the powerless loser in the situation, begging for a chance, to being the ultimate winner who redefined the entire industry. And in English, when you completely reverse a bad situation to your massive advantage, we use a very visual phrase. The phrase is to turn the tables.
To turn the tables. I love the visual imagery of that. I imagine you and I are playing a very competitive board game, like chess. I am losing badly, you have all my pieces captured, and I am about to be defeated. But suddenly I reach out, I literally spin the physical table around, and now I have the winning pieces on my side.
That is exactly the origin of the phrase. It comes from classic board games. It means to suddenly reverse a bad situation and gain a dramatic advantage over your previous failure or your opponents. J.K. Rowling completely turned the tables on the publishing industry that rejected her.
It is such an empowering phrase. Do you have an example sentence for our listeners to practice?
I absolutely do. Listen closely to this exact example sentence. Winning the Innovation Award allowed the young entrepreneur to completely turn the tables on his critics.
Let me read that back, nice and clearly. Winning the Innovation Award allowed the young entrepreneur to completely turn the tables on his critics. It feels so powerful to take a disaster, to take a massive rejection, and not just survive it, but use it as the fuel to turn the tables and become the ultimate winner.
Exactly. And bringing all 5 of our incredible deep dive stories together. Steve Jobs finding freedom after being fired, Alexander Fleming discovering penicillin in a dirty dish, the destructive volcano creating the richest soil, the destroyed business cage forcing a fresh start, and J.K. Rowling outlasting 12 painful rejections. It brings us to a final, unifying philosophy for how we approach life.
A philosophy of the comeback. I have to admit something to you and to our listener right now. I have to concede. My dramatic pessimism has been heavily challenged today. You win this debate.
Wow. The dramatic pessimist is officially convinced that disasters can be good.
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say disasters are good. A volcano is still terrifying. Getting fired is still going to make me cry into my pillow for at least one night.
That's fair.
But I am convinced of the hidden mechanics. These stories prove that the failure is just the first half of the equation. I am realizing that the next time life throws a massive, painful lemon right at my face, I shouldn't just panic. I shouldn't just stare at the closed door. I need to take a deep breath, look around the room, and actively search for the hidden gift behind the disaster. Because, based on everything we talked about, the gift is always there.
It is always there, but only if you are brave enough and patient enough to look for it. This raises an important question for all of us. How do we naturally react to failure? When life pushes us down to the ground, do we stay on the ground and complain? Or do we act like a rubber ball?
Rubber ball. Okay, let's explore that.
Think about the physical mechanics of a small, bouncy rubber ball. When you take a rubber ball and you throw it violently at the hard ground, what does it do?
It hits the ground, compresses, and then bounces right back up into the air.
Exactly. And here is the secret. The harder you throw that rubber ball at the ground, the higher it bounces back up into the sky. The impact is what creates the upward momentum. This is our final, and perhaps most important, key English phrase for today's deep dive. To bounce back.
To bounce back, like the rubber ball hitting the concrete.
Yes. In life, to bounce back means to recover quickly and return to a successful state after experiencing extreme hardship, illness, or a terrible failure. It means you don't just survive the disaster, you learn from your mistakes. You heal your wounds, and you come back significantly stronger than you were before the failure happened.
Steve Jobs bounced back from the public humiliation of getting fired. J.K. Rowling bounced back from the crushing weight of 12 rejections.
Exactly. They used the hard ground to launch themselves higher. And here's the exact example sentence to help you remember this beautiful concept. Great leaders are not defined by their failures, but by how fast they manage to bounce back stronger.
That is incredibly inspiring. Great leaders are not defined by their failures, but by how fast they manage to bounce back stronger. Honestly, after hearing all these stories, it makes me want to go out and fail at a massive project right now just so I can practice bouncing back.
Well, you don't need to go actively searching for failure. Just live your life, and I promise you, failure will eventually find you. But that actually leads me to a final, very provocative thought that I want to leave with you and with our wonderful listener today.
Oh, I love a good, deep, final thought to end the show. Give it to us. What should we be thinking about?
We spend so much of our daily lives being absolutely terrified of failing. We are scared of opening the rejection letter. We're scared of ruining the scientific experiment. We're terrified of getting fired from our comfortable jobs.
Yeah.
But if every single failure we talked about today was actually just a required step in setting the stage for a massive comeback, well, maybe failing isn't what we should be afraid of at all.
If we shouldn't fear failure, then what should we be afraid of?
Maybe the only thing we should truly fear in this life is succeeding too easily.
Succeeding too easily.
Yes, because if you succeed too easily, if you never face a devastating disaster, you completely miss out on the valuable, painful lessons that force you to grow. You miss the volcanoes that clear out your old energy. You miss the disasters that push you out of your comfortable cage and force you to become your greatest, most powerful self. If you succeed too easily, without any struggle, you might just stay average forever.
Oh, wow. That just gave me serious goosebumps. Fearing easy success because it robs you of your potential greatness. That is a completely radical, different way to look at the world. The heavy door slamming in your face really is a profound gift.
It truly is. It forces you to turn around and find the bigger entrance.
Okay, before we officially wrap up this incredible conversation, we have a very crucial job to do. We want to make absolutely sure that you, the listener, walk away from today's deep dive with these 5 English phrases completely locked into your memory, ready to use in your own conversations.
Absolutely. Repetition is the absolute key to mastering any language. So we are going to do a clear, slow review section of all 5 phrases we learned today. I will remind you of a quick summary of the meaning, and we will read the exact example sentence one more time. Let's do this together.
Let's start from the top. Phrase number 1.
Number 1 is a blessing in disguise. This means something that seems like a total disaster or a stroke of bad luck at first, but it actually leads to an amazing, positive result later on. Here is the exact sentence. Getting fired felt terrible at first, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise when he built his own successful company.
Perfect. Phrase number 2.
Number 2 is to start from scratch. This means rebuilding your plans, your project, or your life from the absolute beginning after a total failure, using no previous materials. Here's the exact sentence. After the partnership failed, she had to start from scratch and build a completely new business.
I love that one. Rebuilding without the comfortable cage. Phrase number 3.
Number 3 is to turn the tables. This means completely reversing a bad situation so that you gain a dramatic advantage and come out as the clear winner against your opponents. Here is the exact sentence. Winning the Innovation Award allowed the young entrepreneur to completely turn the tables on his critics.
Spinning the game board around to win. Phrase number 4.
Number 4 is a silver lining. This means finding a positive, comforting, or hopeful element hidden inside a very sad, dark, or stressful event. Here's the exact sentence. Even during the most stressful times, staying positive helps you find a silver lining in every situation.
Looking for the light on the edge of the dark cloud. And our final phrase, number 5.
Number 5 is to bounce back. This means recovering quickly from a failure or hardship, learning from your mistakes, and coming back even stronger than ever, just like a rubber ball hit in the ground. Here is the exact sentence. Great leaders are not defined by their failures, but by how fast they manage to bounce back stronger.
Amazing. Those 5 phrases are so powerful, and they truly capture the entire philosophy we explored today.
They really do. And now, we want to hear directly from you. The most important part of our deep dive conversation is actually what happens after we stop talking.
That's right. We have a crucial question that we want you to answer. We read the comment section constantly, and we want to hear your personal stories. So please listen closely and answer this exact question for us. Have you ever experienced a terrible failure or rejection that turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to you? Tell us your story in the comments below.
I cannot wait to read those stories in the comments. Let me repeat it for you. Have you ever experienced a terrible failure or rejection that turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to you? Tell us your story in the comments below. It is always so inspiring to hear how real people turn their own disasters into personal triumphs.
It is going to be so much fun to read how you all bounced back. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time with us today. Whether you are walking, driving, doing the dishes, or just relaxing at home, we deeply appreciate you being part of this deep dive.
It has been a truly wonderful conversation. Remember, the next time that heavy door slams in your face, do not panic. Just turn around. The grand entrance is waiting for you. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.
Stay positive, keep bouncing back, and we will see you on the next deep dive. Goodbye, everyone.